So if we're considering the labour market, we might want to draw a diagram that would show the impact of a change in the minimum wage on the market. And so what we can do is we can draw a demand and supply diagram to illustrate that. Now we would put wage rates on the vertical axis, quantity as normal on the horizontal axis, wages being the price of labour. We can draw a downward sloping demand for labour diagram line, and we can draw an upward sloping supply of labour line. That would give us an equilibrium wage rate, let's call that WE, and an equilibrium number of employees needed in the market at QE. Now that is what would happen if the labour market for this particular profession was allowed to operate freely. However, the government may consider that WE is too low a wage in that market, and they may be for some reason concerned about that, and we can see in the UK that is what concerned the government enough to introduce the national minimum wage in 1997, which is now approaching £7, and there's different rates, as you know, for different age range and age categories of employees. And the government has also introduced the living wage, so it has been concerned about wages. So to show that, what you can do is you can say, okay, well, let's imagine that the government has imposed the national minimum wage at that point, and we call that a wage floor. The idea being that the employer of that labour is not allowed to set a wage below the national minimum wage. But clearly that has pushed the market out of equilibrium. If you look at what I'm drawing now, you can see that what I'm doing is I'm pulling down a point from where the national minimum wage line crosses the demand for labour line. Now, obviously, because the price for employees has gone up, employers will consider whether they can afford as much labour as they once did. So it is possible that because of the imposition of the higher wage rates, there may have been a contraction in the demand for labour, as we can see here from QE to Q1. At the same time, because employees who might want to supply their labour to that market, and it's important to remember it is the employees that are supplying the labour to that market and it's the employers that are demanding the labour, from an employee's point of view, they will be potentially more encouraged to join that market. So they will be thinking that they will be earning more in that market, and so they would be more willing to supply themselves to that market. So we could see an expansion of supply. So a contraction of demand to Q1, an expansion of supply to Q2 has clearly caused a disequilibrium in the market. Now, if we think about this in practical terms, that means that what has been caused in that market is unemployment. And that was a major concern when the national minimum wage was introduced in the first instance, that it would cause unemployment in the market. Now, if I was to impose a higher national minimum wage, let's say the government has decided that is still too low, and they decide to increase the national minimum wage to NMW2. I won't draw all of the information in, but if you just followed these two lines down, hopefully what you would see is that there would be an even bigger contraction of demand and a bigger expansion of supply caused by the higher wage rate, and that would potentially increase the level of unemployment in that market. It is interesting to look at the statistics and see that in the UK, this phenomenon didn't happen. The period after the introduction of the national minimum wage in 1997 saw falling unemployment rates, not increasing. However, it is possible to say that is because we were in a boom period within the business cycle, and perhaps the national minimum wage wasn't as strongly felt as it might have been if it had been imposed in a different phase of the business cycle, perhaps in recession, for example, after the 2008 crash. So hopefully you can see that what you can do is use your demand and supply knowledge to explain what would be happening in the marketplace. My advice would be, in a question, if they give you, and I'm going to put some colour blue here, let's say they said to you that originally was £6.10 and it had increased to £6.70. I'd always encourage you to put some figures onto your diagrams. That gives you some context, some application marks, and examiners always welcome that.